Don't ignore hairline cracks. They're how whole structures fail. If you've ever felt something's off at home, read this, share it, and help someone else catch a crack before it spreads. Liam Hart wasn't afraid of height or pressure. At 34, the construction engineer and site safety lead on the Arcadia Plaza project felt calm, where other men went dizzy 20 floors up, with the wind in his face, wet concrete steaming below steel beams, humming faintly with each gust. His mind was a catalog of checklists and near misses, the time a careless apprentice skipped a harness clip and nearly paid for it, the day a crane operator misjudged a swing radius by half a foot. Liam remembered every detail because on his sites, forgiveness wasn't a gift, it was a liability no one could afford. The Arcadia build was his pride, 2 million square feet of glass and steel, a mixed-use tower meant to dominate the skyline for decades. To Liam, it was more than a paycheck. It was proof that order and planning could conquer chaos. He walked the girders as if they were sidewalks, measuring with his eyes, correcting by instinct. Workers respected him not because he barked orders though he could, but because they knew he'd step into danger first if something went wrong. 7 years earlier, long before this tower rose, he'd met Natalie. It was at a company picnic on the edge of the Hudson. She was working then as an events coordinator, floating between tables, with an ease he envied, making strangers laugh. Her hair catching the late summer light. Liam was the quiet guy in work boots and a polo shirt, more comfortable around blueprints than small talk. She was glitter to his grit, a bright extrovert who turned conversations into confetti. Somehow she noticed him, asked about his work, teased him for staring at the half-built bridge visible downriver. They started dating, and for a while it worked like balance beams in perfect alignment. Her spontaneity softened his rigidity. His steadiness grounded her wild streak. Marriage came 2 years later, Theo 3 years after that. Their son had Liam's laser focus, already building towers out of blocks that stood longer than they should have, and Natalie's easy smile. Liam used to come home from long push weeks and find his phone lit with videos, Theo stacking Legos, balancing beams across toy cars, grinning as Natalie narrated in the background. It was the kind of simple joy he carried with him onto sites, tucked in the back pocket of his mind whenever the day stretched too long. Lately the videos changed. The smile looked thinner, Theo's eyes a little less bright. Sometimes the clips ended abruptly, like Natalie had somewhere else to be. Calls grew shorter, rushed, filled with background noise. Liam couldn't quite place restaurants' music, the hum of voices that weren't their sons. Natalie explained it all as stress. North Star Media, her company, had gone through downsizing. Events dried up and she'd been shuffled into marketing under a new division head. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, she told him, rolling her eyes with practiced humor. Liam had shaken hands with that division head once, Brent Sawyer. The man was immaculate in a way that screamed effort, hair parted like a blueprint line watch, polished to the kind of shine no construction grit ever dulled. Voice carrying just enough charm to make everyone in the room think they were important. But his gaze lingered half a beat too long, especially when it drifted toward Natalie. Liam noticed, stored it like he stored all potential hazards. "You're being paranoid," Natalie teased when he mentioned it. "Brent's just enthusiastic about work. You know how marketing people are always selling something." That was exactly the problem. Liam had spent his life training himself to recognize stress points, the subtle shift of weight before a scaffold gives the faint buckle of rebar under load. He felt the same vibration at home now, faint but insistent. Something was off, and Brent was the load that didn't belong. Even Sam Delgado, his foreman and closest friend on site, picked up the change. One dusk, they stood at the rail watching the sun flare against unfinished glass. "You've been elsewhere," Sam said, voice low over the clang of tools. "Take a couple days when we pour. Handle it before it handles you." Liam wanted to argue, but he knew Sam was right. Stress ignored is stress compounded. Then his sat phone buzzed with an unknown number. "This is Liam," he answered, expecting a supplier or inspector. "Mr. Hart. This is Esther Long with Child Protective Services. I'm calling about your son." The deck seemed to shift under his boots. "Your son Theo was found wandering downtown around midnight. He told a security guard, 'Mom's friend told me to get out.'" Through the line came a child's broken cry, muffled but unmistakable. "I want my daddy. I want to go home." Liam froze. Sam didn't need the words. He read it in Liam's face. Within moments, Sam barked orders, cranes idled mid-swing, and a truck engine roared to life. Liam was already moving, barreling toward the city, with his mind snapping into incident mode, the same state he entered when a scaffold swayed or a load shifted. Only this time, the casualty wasn't steel or concrete. It was his boy. Natalie and Brent thought Liam was trapped 20 stories up, unreachable for weeks. They were about to learn what happens when a man who spends his life calculating failure paths sees his own family treated like disposable scaffolding. In Liam's world, stress redistributed until something gave, and he was ready to show them exactly what happened when the load path rerouted through him. 90 minutes to think is 90 minutes too long. By the time Liam hit downtown, headlights smeared across wet asphalt, and his mind had built and demolished a dozen scenarios. He replayed Theo's cry over and over, trying to weld it to any explanation that didn't end in betrayal. But every reasonable structure collapsed under the same 5 words: "Mom's friend told me to get out." The phrase ran like a crack through steel, impossible to patch, spreading until nothing held. He drove faster, weaving between semis, heart sinking with the wipers that beat against a light rain. The city rose around him, glass and neon, indifferent to the panic of one father tearing through its arteries. At the CPS office, the fluorescent lights hummed with the fatigue of midnight. Plastic chairs lined the waiting area, posters of smiling families curling at the corners. A security guard nodded him through, expression blank, as if this were just another case in a long line of neglects and accidents. But when the door opened and Esther Long stepped in with Theo, the world narrowed to one frame. The boy broke from her hand and collided with Liam's chest, arms tight like he was clinging to the last beam on a sinking rig. Liam bent low, inhaling the familiar smell of shampoo and sweat, pressing his cheek to Theo's hair as if to confirm he was real. Esther watched with eyes dulled by repetition, the eyes of someone who had witnessed too many reunions under bad circumstances. "Mr. Hart, thank you for coming so quickly," she said, her voice steady but soft. She led them into a small interview room where the hum of a heater filled the silence. On the table sat a manila folder already half open with forms and notes. She laid it out piece by piece. Theo had been found near a parking garage exit in pajamas, barefoot and slippers too big. The security guard reported him dehydrated and crying. Police officers brought him in around 12:30 a.m. Calls to Natalie went unanswered. Esther's tone wasn't accusatory, just matter-of-fact, but each word sank like rebar hammered into concrete. Liam tightened his grip on his son. He knew why calls had failed. Natalie assumed he was unreachable for 3 more weeks. She had gambled their child's safety on her illusion of freedom. "Can I take him home?" he asked, voice like steel under stress. Esther studied him, perhaps gauging if he was the kind who broke under pressure. "Yes, we'll need follow-up visits, but we understand your schedule. We'll mark the case active." She handed him a packet of papers that felt heavier than any blueprint he'd ever carried. By 3 a.m., the house sat in silence, shadows stretching long across the hall. Natalie's car was gone. In the bedroom, drawers gaped where clothes had been pulled. Her favorite weekender bag, missing the anniversary wine from Napa, vanished. Theo was finally asleep upstairs, curled tight around a stuffed dinosaur. Liam moved through the house like a site inspector after a collapse, every detail cataloged. Beneath evening dresses, he found a burner phone, cheap plastic with the weight of dynamite. The messages were short and brutal in their clarity. "Brent Coast, clear tonight. Els on site 3 weeks. Natalie, finally can't wait to be free of this charade. Brent, about time. Pack what you need. We'll figure out the kid situation later. Natalie, he's asleep. Won't even know I'm gone." Liam sat in the quiet living room, staring at the glow of the phone. Rage surged hot and reckless, but he forced it down, cooling it to metal. In his world, fire didn't rebuild, structure did. He picked up his cell and dialed Natalie's main line. Voicemail. He left a flat message: "I'm home. Theo's with me. When you're done, we need to talk. No anger, no theatrics, just facts laid like beams across an unfinished floor." Then he called Avery Holt, his lawyer. Avery answered, groggy voice thick with sleep, but Liam wasted no time. "Start the divorce. Abandonment, adultery. I want full custody." Avery's reply was the language of seasoned attorney's document. Everything avoid confrontation. Do nothing that jeopardizes the custody claim. Liam listened, then ended the call. Plans are useful, but as every engineer knows, field conditions decide. At dawn, the house filled with the smell of toast. Theo patted in, hair sticking up, clutching his dinosaur. He blinked at the table, then at his father. "Where's Mommy?" The question cut deeper than any betrayal. Liam crouched to meet his son's eyes. "Mom made some bad choices," he said carefully. "Dad's going to make sure you're safe." Theo's lip trembled. "Is she coming back?" Liam held his gaze steady, feeling the weight of a truth heavier than concrete. "Not if I can help it," Natalie called that evening, panic sharp beneath her words, the kind of panic that revealed guilt more than concern. "Liam, what are you doing home? You're supposed to be on the site for 3 more weeks." Her voice carried a brittle edge like glass under too much tension. "Emergency extraction." Liam answered flatly, eyes on Theo stacking Legos into improbable towers at the coffee table. "Our son was found downtown at midnight. Funny you weren't here." Silence stretched long enough for him to hear Theo humming softly to himself. Then Natalie's tone shifted into the practiced cadence he knew too well, defensive, rehearsed. She spun a story about a work emergency, Brent needing her for a client crisis, how she had arranged for Mrs. Patterson to watch Theo. Liam's jaw tightened. "Strange," he said, voice even. "Mrs. Patterson's been in the hospital since Tuesday. Hip surgery. I brought her flowers." There was a stumble, then a pause where lies scrambled for footing. "I can explain. I'll be home in an hour." Liam's answer was cold. "No rush. We're ordering pizza. One more thing, I found your burner." The line went dead. He set the phone down gently as if it might detonate, then turned back to his son and helped align a Lego beam steady as if nothing had shifted. At 11, headlights swept across the blinds. Natalie came in like she'd prepared for a performance, hairbrush, makeup, retouched clothes crisp. Even now she was curating an image. The tote hung from her shoulder like an accessory in a magazine spread. She hesitated at the doorway, as though gauging whether charm could still work. "I've been lonely," she began. Tone rehearsed, but eyes restless. "You're gone so much. Brent and I have feelings." Liam studied her the way he studied stress fractures, not for what she claimed to be, but for where the surface betrayed the truth. "And Theo?" he asked quietly. Her mask flickered. "I never meant for him to be affected. I thought—" He cut in, voice low and sharp. "You thought a hospitalized neighbor had him?" Natalie flinched. Tears welled, whether from shame or strategy, he didn't care. "I made a mistake. People make mistakes." "You didn't trip over a loose tile," Liam said. "You walked away. That's not a mistake, that's a decision." He stood, shoulders filling the room, and something in his presence made her step back as if the ground tilted. "Listen carefully. By tomorrow evening, you pack and go. Papers are already filed. I'm seeking full custody. Contested, and every detail of you leaving our child to chase your boss will be on record." Her voice broke into a half-sob, half-snarled protest. "You can't do this. I'm his mother. I have rights." Liam's tone was steel. "You forfeited them when you left him. Rights come with responsibility. You dropped yours." He paused, then added deliberately, "Tell Brent I want to meet, man to man." Fear flickered in her eyes. "No, that's not a good idea." "Why not?" Liam pressed. "He's been making decisions about my family. It's only fair I make a couple about his." Natalie shook her head, retreated toward the door. Like retreat itself might undo what she'd done. After she fled, the house grew silent again, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling beams. Liam sat on the couch and finished the story Theo had begged for earlier about skyscrapers and dragons, his voice steady even while his thoughts churned like concrete mixers. When Theo's breathing deepened into sleep, Liam opened his laptop. If he couldn't confront Brent yet, he would dissect him. He began with LinkedIn, scanned resumes polished to shine, then dug deeper. The timeline had gaps, a consulting break that didn't line up with apartment leases, a startup role at a company dissolved before it existed. Credit history came next, pulled through quiet channels Liam had learned from years of vetting contractors. The numbers didn't add up. Penthouse rent, far outpacing income, car notes, stacked like dominoes, club memberships that would bleed a normal salary dry in months. Either Brent had inherited money or found income streams that wouldn't survive daylight. Liam's gut told him the latter. Every spreadsheet, every fake smiling headshot, every hollow credential pointed the same way: Brent was a man playing rich with someone else's credit. The thought hardened into certainty. This wasn't just infidelity. It was a pattern, a scheme. Before dawn, Liam had a dossier that would shame most private investigators. He closed the laptop and stared at the burner phone on the table, its cheap plastic shell glowing faintly in the dark. In the field cracks that reached the core demanded replacement, not patching. Looking at the screen at the empty wine rack at the door Natalie had walked through, Liam knew his marriage had failed the load test. Tomorrow he would face Brent directly, and unlike concrete or steel, this wasn't about material fatigue. This was about intent, and intent could be crushed. Brent's penthouse screamed new money and insecurity, every surface designed to impress, and every corner whispering fragility. Glass walls framed the skyline like trophies, chrome fixtures reflected light, as if wealth could be magnified by glare, and the single controlled garage entrance suggested both paranoia and the hunger to be exclusive. Liam had scouted it earlier in the day, driving slow past the tower, watching doormen who looked trained to smile but not to notice. He dropped Theo with Sam and Linda Delgado, people he trusted more than blood now, then sat in his truck for 10 minutes with the engine running, letting anger bleed into calculation. He didn't rush a load test. At 7:45, he walked through the garage, his boots sounding deliberate against polished concrete. The keypad at the private elevator was laughable, 4 digits smudged with fingerprint security built for someone who thought image was protection. The ride up was smooth, silent, but Liam's pulse was steady in a way that comes only when a man has already accepted the outcome. Brent opened the door in a silk shirt, wine glass in hand, a smile rehearsed for business dinners and seductions. "Come in," he said with a gracious sweep as if he owned civility itself. "I admire a man who can talk." Inside, Liam clocked the details with the eye of an inspector: marble counters, unused bookshelves lined with untouched first editions, a bottle of Napa Cabernet on the table, the same one he'd bought with Natalie for their anniversary. Brent followed his gaze and smirked, as though theft dressed in confidence could be reframed as charm. "Nice place," Liam said, stepping toward the window, surveying the view like he'd survey a site. "Marketing must pay well." Brent chuckled, sipping. "I've been lucky with investments." Liam didn't turn. "You know what working 20 stories up teaches you? Respect for risk. One bad move and someone dies." Brent shifted, the smile faltering. "Look, Natalie and I, things happen. People connect. You've been gone, she's been lonely." Liam turned, then slow, deliberate. "Things like abandoning a 5-year-old so you could pour wine in stolen glasses." Brent raised his hands slightly, palms out. "That was a miscommunication. She thought someone else." He cut off when Liam moved one clean step, pressing him to the glass with precision born from years of catching falling lines. The pain groaned faintly under Brent's back, the city sprawling a dizzying drop behind him. "On my sites, carelessness doesn't cost jobs. It kills people. We don't tolerate anyone who shifts risk onto the vulnerable." Brent's breath hitched, wine sloshing in the glass he still stupidly held. Liam leaned closer, voice low enough to rattle. "You want to play rich? Play charming, fine, but you put my kid in danger and that ends tonight." He let go suddenly, letting Brent stumble forward, gasping as though he'd just stepped back from a cliff. Liam poured himself a glass of the stolen wine, drank, and set it down without breaking eye contact. This was a gift when Theo was born. "I guess tonight qualifies." Brent's attempted defiance flickered. "You can't threaten me. I'll call the police. You'll regret this." Liam tilted his head, calm as scaffolding. "Tell them what?" "That the husband of the woman you're sleeping with asked you to leave his kid alone. Do you think sympathy is on your side?" He stepped closer again, enough that Brent backed toward the counter, shoulders hunched despite the expensive shirt. "Here's how this goes. You end it, you resign, you move to another city, you pray I forget your name." Brent's jaw clenched, bluff thin. "And if I don't?" Liam's eyes held him like a plumb line. "Then you'll learn some problems can't be solved with lawyers or charm. Some problems are structural. And when a structure fails, nothing saves what's underneath." He moved toward the door, pausing only once. "Advice to keep you breathing: you're used to reputations and rules. I work where one slip ends everything. You have 48 hours. Make the right choice." The door shut behind him with the soft thud of inevitability. In the elevator down, Liam didn't feel triumph. Only the steady hum of a man who'd just tested a beam and found it hollow. Outside, the night air hit his face sharp and cold, but his path was clear. Brent thought himself untouchable. By the time Liam was finished, Brent would understand how fast false structures collapse when the load is real. Morning light crept across the hardwood floors but did nothing to warm the house. Lego bricks sprawled where Theo had left them the night before, tiny towers standing like fragile disguises for the storm underneath. Liam stood in the kitchen, coffee cooling in his hand, staring out at the backyard where the grass bent under dew. When the doorbell rang, sharp and insistent, his chest tightened. He already knew who it would be. Natalie stood on the stoop, hair unbrushed, tote bag sagging from one shoulder, mascara smudged into tired shadows. She looked like someone who had rehearsed tears in the car mirror before knocking. "I need to talk," she whispered, as if volume could soften consequences. "Theo's at school," Liam said evenly, stepping back to let her in. She sat on the couch, twisting the tote strap, over and over, her movements restless. "You can't take him from me. I'm his mother. You can't erase that." Liam's reply was controlled, precise. "You left him alone to wander a garage at midnight." "That's not a lapse, Natalie. That's neglect." She flinched, face crumbling for an instant before she drew from the well of self-pity. Words spilled about loneliness, about Liam's long weeks consumed by beams and columns, about how the job stole him from the marriage. She said Brent had made her feel noticed, alive again, like she wasn't invisible in her own home. "And our kid?" Liam asked quietly, his voice a blade sliding between excuses. Natalie's eyes shimmered. "I didn't think—" "That's exactly the problem," he said. He turned to the window, watching sunlight crawl across the glass, his reflection standing solid against hers. "In my world, when a beam cracks to the core, we don't spackle it and hope. We replace it. This marriage is cracked through." She lunged forward, grabbing his arm with both hands, tears spilling freely now. "Don't do this. Don't take Theo from me. I can fix it. I'll change. I'll be better." He freed himself with a deliberate pull. "He needs safe. You've proven you can't provide it." Her sobs filled the room, but Liam's face remained as still as concrete. The man who had spent his life preventing disasters knew when a collapse was irreversible. Later that afternoon, Brent's number lit up his phone with a flood of messages. First demands to talk, then threats about legal action and career damage. Liam ignored them. By evening, the pounding at the door came not from Natalie this time, but from two patrol officers' uniforms, crisp notebooks ready. Liam welcomed them in, calmly laid out the timeline with the clarity of a site report. Theo found downtown in pajamas, dehydrated and alone. Calls unanswered. Natalie absent. He handed over the burner phone with the damning thread of texts, showed them the footage from the garage security camera that Sam had helped him pull. One officer scribbled notes while the other listened, his expression settling into something like disgust. When Liam finished, silence stretched until the officer closed his notebook with a snap. "Keep your boy safe, Mr. Hart," he said firmly. "We'll handle the rest." Natalie showed up again 2 days later, this time flanked by her attorney, a woman with a tailored suit and a voice polished like courtroom marble. She argued that Liam was controlling, that he had cut Natalie off from family funds, that he was manipulating the narrative. Liam let his own lawyer, Avery Holt, dismantle each claim with exhibits and affidavits, pay stubs showing equal access photos of Natalie on nights she claimed to be trapped, and the thread of messages Brent hadn't realized would read like indictment. In family, court appearances matter, and Natalie had dressed for sympathy. She dabbed her eyes, framed herself as a woman suffocating under a cold husband's dominance. But when the judge leaned forward, tapping the burner printouts with one manicured nail, her voice carried no sympathy. "Mrs. Hart, your narrative does not align with the evidence. You did not leave because you feared for your safety. You left to pursue an affair, and in doing so you abandoned a child. That is not protective behavior. That is reckless." Tears fell freely down Natalie's cheeks then, but Liam felt no satisfaction. You don't cheer when a tower caves in. You clear the rubble and make sure no one's trapped underneath, especially the smallest ones. That night, Liam tucked Theo into bed and sat beside him long after he fell asleep, listening to the even rhythm of his breathing. He thought of how fragile a structure could look moments before failure, how easy it was to miss the warning signs. He thought of Natalie's excuses, of Brent's arrogance, of the paper-thin foundation their marriage had rested on. Then he thought of Theo, of the boy's small hand clutching his, of the trust that could still be rebuilt if he acted with precision. Some cracks you can't patch. You tear down, you rebuild, you design for resilience. That was the work ahead of him now. 3 weeks carved a rhythm Liam had never imagined, but quickly grew to guard with everything he had. Mornings began with the clatter of cereal bowls and the rustle of brown bag lunches. He and Theo shared breakfast at the counter, sometimes racing to see who could finish first, sometimes laughing over spilled milk that turned the table into a mess they cleaned together. Then came drop-offs at school, where Theo clutched his backpack straps tight but walked in with a courage that made Liam's chest ache. Work filled the middle of the day: site inspections, safety briefings, problem-solving with Sam. But now Liam set his watch to pickups. No late meetings, no overtime. Evenings were Lego towers sprawling across the living room, soccer cleats kicked off by the door baths that filled the hallway with steam, and stories told under blankets until small eyes finally closed. When the house went quiet, it was a good quiet, the kind of silence you get when scaffolding has been checked and tightened, not the hollow stillness of absence. Yet outside that cocoon, paperwork stacked high. Custody petitions, incident reports, lawyer calls, and the endless churn of hearings loomed. Natalie's attorney filed motions painting Liam as cold, controlling, too rigid for parenting. They framed him as the kind of man who treated family like a job site, measured, disciplined, unfeeling. Liam read every line, jaw clenched, but said little. He knew Avery would handle it, and Avery was a surgeon with facts. Still, the accusations cut. Every allegation was a chip aimed at the foundation he was building with Theo. When the family court hearing came, the small courtroom buzzed with that thick curiosity reserved for domestic wreckage. A handful of local reporters filled the benches, pens ready, hungry for the drama of a hard-working father and a runaway mother. Natalie arrived in muted colors, hair pinned back, posture designed to evoke fragility. She dabbed her eyes at the right moments, glanced toward the judge as though silently asking for mercy. "He controls everything," she testified, voice trembling like a rehearsed performance. "I was suffocating. I only wanted out. Brent made me feel like I had a choice." Avery rose with calm precision. He presented security footage of a small boy in pajamas under harsh garage lighting, clutching himself against the night. He submitted hospital records confirming Mrs. Patterson's surgery, dismantling Natalie's claim that she had arranged childcare. He placed the burner phone on the evidence table, the thread glowing like exposed wiring. "Pack what you need. We'll figure out the kid situation later." The judge. Eleanor Mayfield flipped through the stack of exhibits, glasses sliding down her nose. Her expression hardened with each page. Finally, she looked up, gaze sharp enough to slice through the room. "Mrs. Hart, your testimony conflicts with the evidence in ways that are not minor. You did not leave because you feared for your safety. You left to pursue an affair, and in doing so, you abandoned your child. That is not protective. That is negligence." Natalie's tears came in earnest, then smudging mascara down her cheeks. But Liam felt no surge of triumph. Engineers don't celebrate when a tower caves in. They clear the rubble, account for casualties, and begin again. His only thought was of Theo, safe in school at that very hour, drawing crayon skylines on loose paper while adults decided the shape of his future. As the gavel struck and the hearing adjourned, Liam exhaled slowly, the kind of release you give when a load finally shifts off a beam without cracking it. He didn't smile, didn't glance toward the reporters, didn't even look at Natalie as she slumped into her chair. He walked out of the courtroom with Avery at his side, already planning dinner, already thinking of how he'd tell Theo that night's story. A structure had been tested, and while the damage was clear, the foundation he was building around his son had held. By fall, the courthouse had become its own stage, hallways smelling of burnt coffee and newsprint camera crews staking out corners as if waiting for a celebrity scandal. The Hart case carried headlines like, "When Foundations Fail," and every tabloid framed Liam as either the stoic hero father or the cold, domineering husband. He ignored both. He wasn't here for the story. He was here for his son. Inside courtroom 3, Judge Eleanor Mayfield presided with a gaze that brokered no nonsense. The jury box was filled with 12 faces screened for bias. No one who blindly believed mothers were always victims. No one who assumed silence in men meant violence. The prosecution wasted no time laying blueprints of motive and method. Brent Sawyer wasn't a man caught in a messy romance, but an operator running a scheme. Groom vulnerable women stretched thin by work or loneliness, collect personal financials under the guise of protecting themselves. Open accounts in their names, launder money, move on. Natalie had become both partner and pawn, but what made this case burn federal sharp wasn't just the fraud, it was the child left wandering a garage at midnight. Esther Long testified first. Her voice carried the quiet exhaustion of someone who had seen too many broken families. but her words landed like hammer strikes. She recounted finding Theo dehydrated and confused, repeating the two sentences that froze the room. Mom's friend told me to get out. I want my daddy. I want to go home. The jury shifted uneasily. One man rubbed at his eyes. The garage security guard followed, confirming the time and conditions. A video clip projected on the screen showed Theo's small figure in oversized slippers under harsh light, every frame a damning rebuke to Natalie and Brent's choices. A digital forensics analyst took the stand next, mapping two phones tied to one penthouse, mirroring the burner messages word for word. Each text read less like conversation and more like indictment. Brent's attorney tried to steer the narrative back toward adult choices, consenting affairs, emotional dissatisfaction, but his pivot collapsed under the weight of numbers. A forensic accountant presented slides of 17 bank accounts, over $200,000, funneled and churned the same digital fingerprints repeating across states. The scheme was industrial, not accidental. Then Natalie took the stand. The room held its breath as she described long nights of loneliness, Liam's long absences, the way Brent had slid into the void with attention that felt like rescue. She said Brent told her to photograph contracts and cards to protect herself, that she believed it was harmless. But when asked directly why she left Theo that night, her voice cracked. I thought he would sleep through. I thought it would be fine. Her words hung fragile, then shattered under cross-examination. The prosecutor pressed, did she know Mrs. Patterson was hospitalized? Had she checked? Natalie swallowed hard, admitting she hadn't. Her eyes darted toward Liam, once pleading for acknowledgement, but he stared straight ahead. I was lonely, she said finally, voice collapsing into confession. That doesn't excuse leaving my son. Brent wasn't a way out. He was a trap. Brent's lawyer tried one last pivot, targeting Liam himself. Mr. Hart, did you confront my client at his apartment? Did you assault him? Did you threaten to kill him if he didn't leave town? Liam's reply was calm even. I warned him to stop endangering my son and to leave our lives. That's a warning, not a death threat. Judge Mayfield cut the defense short, pulling the trial back to its core, not a lover's quarrel, but a child's safety. Finally, Liam gave his victim impact statement. No theatrics, no raised voice, just a sequence like reading an incident log. The late-night call, the broken cry, the empty bed, the burner phone glowing in his palm, the bottle of anniversary wine on another man's table. He said the word safe as often as a site lead says harness. On a build, if a crack reaches the core, we don't smear mud over it. We stop and replace. I did the same at home. Closing arguments cemented the beam's motive. Money method groom, gather open churn harm a child, alone culpability messages treating a 5-year-old as an afterthought. The defense pled for mercy, called it romance, tangled with missteps. But the math on the screens told a harsher story. The jury deliberated 2 hours. When they filed back in their verdict, landed with the clarity of a steel drop, guilty on fraud, identity theft, and endangering a minor. Brent's face drained of confidence, his lawyer stiff beside him. Judge Mayfield sentenced him to 8 years plus restitution. Her words cutting through the silence. You used intimacy as cover to destroy trust and safety. You will pay for that. Natalie wasn't criminally charged, but the neglect went into the family file. Visitation would be supervised with mandatory parenting therapy. As the cuffs clicked around Brent's wrists, he glanced once at Liam, mouth opening for a last jab, but whatever words he had died in his throat. In the gallery, a man Liam didn't know whispered, "Thank you, another victim from another city finally seeing justice move." Reporters swarmed outside the courthouse steps, questions flying like loose nails in wind. Liam said only one thing before taking Theo home. Children aren't variables in adult math. Cameras flashed, microphones stretched, but he didn't stop. He had a pickup to make a Lego skyline waiting on the living room floor, and a boy who needed him steady. The FBI field office wasn't cinematic. No glowing monitors or dramatic busts, just glass walls, gray carpet, and the hum of fluorescent lights. Still, to Liam, it felt heavier than any skyscraper lobby he'd ever walked. Special Agent Monroe, lean and sharp, the kind of man whose haircut looked like it was timed by a stopwatch, shook his hand firmly. "Mr. Hart, thanks for coming in. What you handed us cracked the case wider than you know." He led Liam down a hallway lined with bulletin boards strung with red thread and faces. It wasn't one or two, but dozens photographs of women from different cities, professions scrawled beneath: teacher, nurse, shop manager, flight attendant. Next to each face, photocopies of contracts, blurred ID scans, email printouts. All trails led back to Brent Sawyer. He wasn't just a reckless executive with an eye for married women, Monroe said. He's been running a pattern for 12 years. Different cities, different names, but always the same opening gambit. Find a woman stretched thin by traveler shifts, tell her she's being ignored, make himself the antidote, then start planting seeds. Protect yourself. Take photos, cover your bases. By the time she realizes he's harvested documents, opened lines of credit, churned cash, and left her in debt. Liam stared at the wall, each thread a fracture line, and nobody stopped him, Monroe exhaled. We tried, but he was slippery, small enough in each city to look like domestic fallout, large enough overall to be a ghost. What we lacked was a link tying him to direct harm of a child. Your burner thread did that. It made him not just a con man, but a man endangering a minor. That unlocked charges we couldn't push before. They sat in a conference room with blinds half drawn. Monroe opened a file thicker than any construction spec Liam had ever reviewed. Statements from victims were highlighted. He told me it was just a few papers. No big deal. I thought I was helping. He called himself a financial advisor. I believed him. One page showed balances drained from savings accounts. Another showed leases signed in women's names, cars driven by him but repossessed in theirs. He lived rich by bleeding other people dry, Monroe said. And the charm made it easier. He didn't steal wallets. He stole trust. Liam felt his hands tighten on the chair arms. He had always known Brent wasn't just a fling, but seeing the sprawl, the deliberate cruelty made his stomach knot. Part of him wanted to walk out to starve the man of attention. Another part knew he owed these strangers, these women who'd been cornered by the same smile, the same false promises, the respect of looking straight at the damage. "Is Natalie going to prison?" he asked finally. Monroe shook his head. "Not on the federal side. Her neglect stays in family court. She didn't mastermind the scheme. She became a cog. The choice to leave your son that night is hers alone, but the scheme, this web, is his." Liam nodded, jaw set. The answer didn't surprise him, but hearing it put weight behind his resolve. He thought of Theo, of the boy's quiet voice in the CPS office, of how close danger had pressed. If one more factor had gone wrong, if one more moment had shifted, his son might have been lost in the machinery of Brent's greed. Monroe leaned forward, lowering his voice. "You helped stop a cycle. Without your evidence, this would have kept rolling to the next city, the next woman, the next family. That's no small thing." On the way out, Liam paused in front of the bulletin board one more time. He saw faces worn by regret, by shame, by exhaustion, but also by survival. He wondered how many children had been caught in the ripple, how many families had bent under the strain. The thought hardened something inside him, not anger, but a vow. He wasn't going to let Theo grow up believing safety was optional. Outside the office, the city was loud with horns and footsteps, but Liam walked with steady pace. On the way home, he stopped at the park. Theo's red sneakers flashed across the grass as he chased a soccer ball with other kids, his laughter carrying clear through the autumn air. Spotting his dad, Theo ran with both arms waving, barreling into him with the full weight of a child who trusts the world to hold. Liam sat on the bench, watching the sound of the FBI agent's words replaying, "You helped stop a cycle." He filed it under something simpler. "I gave my kid a safer childhood." He leaned back, letting the late sun warm his face, and thought about the blueprint ahead. Brent was finished. Natalie's place in their lives had narrowed to supervised hours. But Theo's future, the foundation Liam would guard with every ounce of strength, was wide open. A year later, Arcadia Plaza cut the sky like a mirror, its glass catching sunlight in sheets that spilled brilliance over the city. On opening day, the plaza was dressed for celebration. Bunting rippled along the fences. A brass band blasted cheerful notes and vendors handed out free coffee and donuts to crowds who came to see the newest symbol of progress. Liam stood near the rope line in a pale blue shirt and gray tie, Theo's small hand clasped firmly in his own. The boy's eyes went wide as he craned his neck upward. "Daddy, it's like the tower I built," he shouted with excitement that turned heads around them. Liam bent down, pressing his forehead gently to his son's. "It is," he said softly, "but yours is stronger. You build with love. They mostly build with money." People nearby smiled at the exchange without knowing why. Strangers could sense sincerity even if they didn't understand its weight. Colleagues from the site approached, clapping Liam on the back, congratulating him not just for the building, but for surviving a year that would have broken many men. A reporter with a notepad asked what he had learned from everything. Liam gave the same phrase he'd spoken outside the courthouse months earlier: kids aren't variables in adult math. The words landed again, heavy enough to be quoted in the next morning's paper. After the ribbon was cut, after Theo had tugged on the ceremonial rope with all his 5-year-old mite father and son slipped away. On the way home, they stopped at a small ice cream parlor, Theo with chocolate and sprinkles, Liam with black coffee and a cone, a flavor Theo teased him for. The boy talked between licks about his next Lego project, not just a tower this time, but a whole city with a school, a hospital, a park, and windbreak walls so nothing would topple. Every build needs a foundation and a shield, Liam said, nodding. Life too. Evenings found their cadence. Practices and permission slips, neighbors over for Saturday barbecues, kids shrieking in the yard while smoke curled from a battered grill. The house that once felt hollow now pulsed with life. Still, Liam didn't let the comfort make him careless. He checked locks twice, filed copies of documents in safe places, kept the CPS contact card on the fridge, and joined the single parents group at the community center. Safety wasn't a mood anymore. It was a method. Then came the day of supervised visitation. Liam sat in a brightly lit room at the center while Theo stacked blocks. Natalie entered, thinner hair, pulled back sneakers, scuffed tote bag stuffed with coloring books. She smiled nervously, her eyes darting toward her son. Under the quiet watch of a caseworker, she played blocks with him, gentle, careful, pausing whenever he looked toward Liam as though to confirm his father's outline. When the hour ended, she stood near the door, hesitant, then whispered, "You were right. He's happier and safer with you. I just hope someday he'll forgive me." Liam gave a small nod. He carried no heat for her anymore, only the knowledge that some structures can't be retrofitted once cracked through. He wouldn't dynamite what remained of a mother-son tie. Time would do what it does. That June, Liam and Theo camped in the mountains. After s'mores, they lay under a sky so wide it hummed stars pricked sharp against the dark. Theo curled against him, whispering, "Daddy, will our tower always stand?" Liam looked at the boy's eyes glowing with firelight and answered with the only truth a builder who has learned the cost of shortcuts can. If we set every brick with truth and love and responsibility, it will stand even in storms. Theo nodded solemnly, then hugged tighter as if slotting one more invisible block into the wall around them. Liam lay awake longer, listening to his son's breathing, thinking about the journey from wreckage to rebuilding. Out in the city, a glittering high-rise bore his name in blueprints. In their living room, a Lego skyline grew taller every week. More impressive than both was the small child sleeping easily in a quiet house, checked and rechecked for safety. The lesson was carved into him now. Romance can wobble, but foundations should not. Love without reliability is decoration. Love with responsibility is structure. If you spot a crack in your life, don't paint over it. Shore it. Replace what has failed. Build with care, because children are never variables in adult math. Pass the lesson on: someone else's foundation may need it tonight.